So it's very common for functions to accept a parameter, but they don't necessarily have to. So let's get rid of that parameter for right now. And let's just have it, and let's rename it so that it is our main function. So the main function, there is actually a better way of doing this that we're going to talk about later, but the main function is where I'm going to put all code relating to the beginning and end of my module. So the script that I'm writing, the module that I'm writing, is going to start off with a simple call to main. Don't need to pass any parameters, and that's basically just going to be like the boot file. It's going to boot everything. It's going to start the script up, and from there it's going to it'll make decisions as to what we should do. So let's say that I am creating a calculator that does two things. It adds and it subtracts. So this is similar to the really inefficient calculator problem that I have shared with my students. So we're going to, first, in the main code, we're going to welcome the user. Welcome to the calculator. And I'm going to brand this because I have a brand. Welcome to the MetaTutor calculator. Boom. It's going to be a pretty bad calculator, so maybe I don't want to put my brand on it, but whatever. So we're going to welcome the user, and then we're going to launch the menu. And again, menu isn't going to take any parameters, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find that now. So I'm going to type def menu. And note that it does have to be above the call to it. So down here is where I can execute it. I can only execute that because up here it's defined. Now, if I have this menu down here, I have to have a definition for menu up here. Definition for menu can't come down lower. Python isn't going to like that. It's going to give me a complaint. And in the menu, I'm just going to, I've already welcomed the user, so perhaps I'll just present them with the choices that they can make. So let's say press 1 to add numbers, and then, whoops, I'm trying to type with my keyboard like way in front of me so I can't even see it, but I'm going to stop doing that. Press 1 to add numbers, print, press 2 to subtract numbers. And then I'm going to have to accept the user input, so I'm going to space it out because I like to keep my code nice and organized. So I'll do hashtag or comment or pound, whatever. I'm going to comment and just say print statements so I can easily find them. And then I'm going to enter, put some space there, and then do user input. And let's just say user, maybe I'll call that mode, like the mode of use, add or subtract. We'll call it like mode choice equals, and I'm accepting 1 or 2, so I'm going to use an integer. I'm going to cast it to integer and then do input and choice. Very simple prompt. And then now I'm going to create a conditional tree. So I'm just going to conditional statements for add subtract. So if mode choice equals, and we're going to be using double equal sign because it's a comparison. So if it's equal to 1, then we're going to add. If elif, so else if mode choice double equal sign 2, then we're going to subtract, and then else. So if it's literally anything else, then we're just going to print don't recognize, or input not recognized. Try again. And I'm going to type in menu, which is going to call the function that we're currently in, which will restart it. So I made references to the functions add and subtract, which I haven't yet written. And that's not the end of the world, because I can just go ahead and write them now. But I need to think about this for a second. There are a few different ways that we can do this. And, you know, I'll map these out, I guess. So I'm just going to change my input now so that you can see my drawing board. And let's map out the different ways that we can do this. So option 1 is we accept the two numbers. So I'm just going to accept two numbers that we're either going to add or subtract. So accept two numbers. And then our next move from there would be to pass two numbers as parameters. And essentially the problem that I'm faced with here is if we look back at my code, at the place where it says add and subtract, so at add right there, what we're seeing, or what we're going to do if we don't pass through parameters is we're going to have to create a function for add and a function for subtract that are then going to have to ask the user for the two numbers they'd like to add or the two numbers that they'd like to subtract. But whatever code that I'm writing there to request that the user enters two numbers is going to be the exact same for add and subtract. It's going to be the exact same. So I want to find a way to write that code once and make my program a little bit prettier, a little bit more elegant, and that way I, again, just don't have to write it twice, once for add and once for subtract. So the question is then, do I accept the two numbers first and then pass them as parameters, or do I, from inside either add or subtract, do I call a method, call the number input method, or function, sorry. That's the term I prefer to use. So I'm going to go with number 1, and I'll show you what number 2 would look like in a little bit. But just to start off, we're going to try number 1, and essentially what we're going to have to do then is we're going to have to input code up above the user input, so we can accept the user input. I don't care what they've entered yet, if it's add or subtract. Want to do print statements again, but I'll be more specific. It's going to be request for two numbers, and then the print statements up above are going to be request for add or subtract choice. And so I'm going to print please enter first number, and I'm actually just going to do instead of doing a print method, I'm going to do I'm going to make a variable called first num and make it equal to int input, just like that. And then just to make that queue a little bit more obvious for the user, I'm going to put a colon there. I'm going to copy this line, I'm going to paste it exactly, and then just delete first, make it second num, and then instead of first say second number. So please enter first number, please enter second number. It's gonna and that's gonna store two values in first and second num. Great. And that combines that into, so it's a request for two numbers and accept user input, which is nice. So now what I can do is I can pass through first num and second num as parameters through the functions, and that's it. So that's the first way of tackling this problem. The second way of tackling the problem is going to look a little bit different. Essentially, what I would have to do is I would not be passing through these parameters. Instead, I would take this code, the first and second number, and the first and second number request. I want to get that comment too, and I want to copy it first. There we are. And I'd make another function for that. Def request numbers, something like that. And I would do it here. Here's the thing. I'm trying to solve this problem without using complicated variable types like lists, and in order to return two numbers, first num and second num, I would have to return a list. So I'm going to, that's one of the reasons why I'm avoiding doing this. But if I could do that, it would be kind of straightforward. You know, there's several other ways that you can implement this code, but I don't feel like exploring that. So let's go back to the code that we had. Let me undo a fair amount. There we are. So now we're back at the point where we have our request for add or subtract choice, our user input for the add or subtract choice, and then we have our request for the two numbers. And if mode choice equals 1, then we add the first num and second num. If mode choice is equal to 2, then we subtract them. Else, and you know, tell the user that we don't recognize the input and force them to restart. So now we have to design the functions for add and subtract. So we can't do something like this. We can't do it without parameters because we've specifically used it below using parameters. So it's going to have to accept two variables. We can name them whatever we want. I'm just going to do num1 and num2 because that's kind of easy. The names that you give variables in here don't have to be the name of the variables that you actually pass through. I can pass whatever the heck I want through here, variables of any different name. The names that I give the variables up here are what I use inside the actual function. Everything indented this far. So the add function is going to be really easy. Both the add and subtract are going to be really easy because of the built-in return statement. So we're just going to return num1 plus num2. And what that does is that's going to give back a number. It's going to return a number. It's going to return the sum of the two numbers passed, which right now I'm not making use of that. But what I can do is I can, up above, I can create a variable called result, set it equal to 0 by default, and then I can set result equal to whatever is returned from add. So add first num, second num is going to turn, first num is going to be num1, second num is going to be num2, and then it's going to return those numbers, or the sum of those numbers, and so that means that result is now going to equal that value. Same thing for the subtract, except I'm going to do def subtract num1, num2, and I'm going to say return num1 minus num2. So it's a very inefficient calculator. It's a really silly way of doing things, but it does work. So once we've done that, we're going to want to print result. So let's print, well actually I guess we should do that up here instead. We should say print result, say the sum of, and then you could do first num, and then plus second num, equals, and then the result. Then you can do something like first num minus second one equals result for the other. And then at the end of this code, I want to repeat anyway. So let's actually take the repeat from the else statement, and let's just tab it back. So when it's tabbed like this, that means it belongs to that else statement. That's all part of the same block. But if I pass it back here, it's in a straight line beneath else, elif, if, and all the other code. So that means that it's going to run regardless of what happens in this part right there. So let's go ahead and run this code and see what happens. So I've copied my code over into idle since I had an issue with my other text editor. It's pretty, but it doesn't function, which is unfortunate. But I'm going to run this, and now it gives me the ability to choose. So press 1 to add number, press 2 to subtract numbers. So I'm going to hit 1, please enter first number, 5, second number 12, and oh no, we have a lot of code. Oh man. Let's see what happened there. So I'm going to go back to the code and the pretty example. There we have it. And I'll do that. There we are. So the code, the error that it gave us is, I'll read it off to you. It says that it's a type error, can only concatenate string, not int, to string. And so what it's complaining about is this right here, that I'm putting numbers in here instead of strings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert all the numbers to strings like that. And so if you ever get that error and you think, well, I'm trying to display numbers, so what the heck? Yeah, you can convert them to strings so that they display properly. And that's kind of straightforward. It's not that difficult. And this is what real coding is having errors that you totally overlooked or didn't even realize were a thing, and then having to just go back and say, oh, whoops, messed that one up. So let me copy this all, paste it back into idle, and then let's run it again. So same stuff. Do 1, 5, 12. Boom. And there it says in plain English, the sum of 5 plus 12 equals 17. Awesome. So then it restarts the menu and it says press 1 to add numbers, press 2 to subtract numbers. And notice that it doesn't welcome us again because that would be pointless. I've been using the calculator, so you don't need to welcome me. Let's subtract. So please enter the first number. Let's do 999 minus 345. 654. Oh, that's kind of cool. 345 is going up, 654 is going down. Alright, let's try, oh, I enter 3, and it says please enter first number, so I'm curious why that's happening, since technically it should be saying input not recognized. So, that's kind of funny. I'm not 100% sure why that's happening, but let's see which one it does. So 5 and 5. And then it said input not recognized. Ah, okay. See, so that's an error that comes about, or that we can recognize. That's not so much an error, so much as an issue with the way that we handle the input of numbers. And so earlier when I went over the two different ways that we could accept numbers, we decided to accept the two numbers first, but if the mode choice is equal to 0, then that's because the user's trying to get out of it or something. And so it's annoying to have to ask, it's annoying and misguided to say, oh, we don't recognize your input, but hey, first, please enter some numbers. And so, that might be a good reason to actually put this into its own function. But that's not something that I'm going to do because I've covered all the material that I wanted to. So for now, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you for your attention so far.